Welcome, Driss Berraho, to the podcast, The Hydrogen Leader. I'm very happy to have you.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today, Björn.
Yeah. So as you know, with this format, we target to tell untold stories of successful people in the hydrogen economy, share their unique insights and also their leadership approach. And you are a very important person in the hydrogen economy because you are leading the hydrogen activities of the company ACWA Power. And we will come to that in a minute in more detail. But before we get into the business topics and all the big projects that you are running, I want to ask you a very basic question. Who is Driss Berraho?
Good question. So Driss I'm basically a 38-year-old renewable energy professional, uh, father of three, and I've been happily living with my family for a little bit more than 10 years now in the Middle East. I'm born and raised in Morocco, educated primarily in French and also in France. I had a fairly international path over the last few years that led me to Sweden, but
Mhm.
also to London, Paris, before doing eventually a short landing in Morocco when I joined ACWA Power, and eventually moved to the Middle East. So my passion for renewables started really at university. I had a great uh, professor on climate engineering who happened to be a co-author of the IPCC, and really the facts really brought in front of me really created the the realization, but also the feel and the need to be a part of taking an active role in tackling climate change and our
Mhm.
energy
Mhm.
transition. I would say the next step was actually an introduction that he made himself to another person. His name is Cédric Philibert, who was a long-lasting member of the Renewable Energy Division of the International Energy Agency, where I had the honor to spend a few months working together with him. A very inspirational person, a well-renowned climate journalist also, that really got me convinced that I will not rest until really I have like take an active dent on really addressing climate change. And back in the days, I was actually had a small contribution to the concentrated solar power roadmap that he was preparing.
Yes.
He was back in, and that's what got me focusing into the industry and how I could implement really this passion of mine. I
Mhm.
started my journey with a smaller venture called New Energy. I had these big, crazy ideas to contribute to desert tech and put massive CSP plants in North Africa, pull cables and export to Europe. Back in the days, a lot of people were laughing at us because it was too expensive and Europe didn't need power. It was actually had excess power and was looking to export that excess power. Of course, today's pictures has become very different. And I believe those topics are now gaining much more traction than what they used to have at the time of Desert Tech. But eventually, that led me to ACWA Power back in 2013. So ACWA Power had just won the first tender for a CSP in South Africa, but also in Morocco. There was the Noor Ouarzazate 1 project. And so I kept knocking all doors until I could get on board with the company. And that led me to a fantastic journey where there was part of the team that first won the tenders and got them to close the Noor 2 and Noor 3 projects in Ouarzazate using both parabolic trough technology, but also one of the first molten salt tower technologies with storage. Same team that led me to, of course, deal with the Redstone project, another solar tower, molten salt
Yeah.
technology, 12 hours of storage, and then the pinnacle in Dubai, actually, with the Noor Energy One project, which today stands at already under operation. a gigantic 950 megawatt project, integrating both solar PV, concentrated solar power in the form of parabolic troughs, but also the highest molten salt tower in the world, standing at
Yeah.
260 meters and with 15 hours of
200.
storage, and virtually delivering renewable powered baseload. And that was the clear mandate that our customer gave, is that I will only get to that kind of scale if you are able to meet my cost of production based on a combined cycle run with natural gas. We did it. Now it's built under operation. So that was really like a great achievement for me. And really, in that journey, getting to the point where renewables were a big question mark as to whether it will make ever any sense, to the point where we're actually managed to set the benchmark where we are displacing fossil fueled baseload power in the Middle East. I think that really was like, for me, it was quite an achievement. But I just set the bar in terms of what should be the next frontier in addressing the energy transition. And this is where actually green hydrogen kind of as an opportune time to identify what is the next barrier that we need to address in getting us towards a more sustainable energy system.
What impresses me most about these large scale projects, when they are there, they are impressive. But when you plan them, it's years ahead, right? And I think it needs a lot of perseverance and belief that what you plan will finally be successful. Is that a pattern, building these big projects, that you are excited to start on a blanket sheet of paper and then see this massive scale projects? Or is that the passion that drives you? Because it's the same with the hydrogen projects that we will come to later, right?
Yes, I guess it's I would say a mix of passion,
Mhm.
but utter belief also that
Yeah.
we will only be able to change the way we produce and consume energy in the long term by having this perseverance and really tenacity in making those changes. The energy system and the energy business, by definition, is a long-term business. It is not
Yes.
a short-term business. All the decisions that I've made today are decisions that basically will have an impact for the next 30 to 40 years. Whatever we build actually in 2 years from now will still be standing in another 30 to 40 years. So by definition, the energy business is a business and an industry of the long term.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that it takes vision, and that's why there are only very few companies actually that have the actually the stomach to be able to take on those challenges. And I believe that Aqua Power is one of those fantastic institutions that have that long-term vision and the stomach to take risk in the short term for the long-term gains. And this explains also where and how the company got to where it is, starting with virtually less than 50 megawatt of installed capacity in renewables back in 2012, and standing today with a capacity of more than 54 gigawatts of contracted capacity, and only growing and only accelerating, as a matter of fact, towards 2030.
Yeah, this is indeed the case, because sometimes when you're working for that long in the hydrogen economy, at least in Europe, you sometimes feel this yo-yo effect that in one year everybody is excited and the next year everybody is depressed. But these type of projects go for the long term, and those are the ones who are successful, who continue to play the long game, right? So let's speak a little bit or a little bit more about Aqua Power, because I think it's not only a leading company in the Middle East, but what you have in mind and the scale that you deploy is really globally relevant, right? So please tell us about Aqua Power. What is the main business, and why are you now into hydrogen?
Sure. So Aqua Power has a very interesting story. So it was born in 2004 in Saudi
Mhm.
Arabia on the back of the privatization of the water and the power sector. And very early on, Aqua Power got successful through partnership in securing some of the very first projects that were tendered under the independent water and power producer model in Saudi Arabia. Fast forward, after both an expansion in terms of capacity, technology, but also geography, ACWA Power now is a company that is present in 15 countries, that has a contracted capacity on the power of 94 gigawatts, out of which roughly 52, more than 56% is renewable power across solar PV, wind, concentrated solar power also. We are, very interestingly, also the largest private desalination company in the world, where every day, from a contracted capacity perspective, we desalinate 10 million cubic meter per day. So,
And that is
which
transferring salt water into fresh water, right?
That is correct, yes. So basically, we operate we live in regions of the world that are facing extreme water scarcity. And without desalination, there will be none of the cities and none of the population that you would see today. And of course, technology has had a fantastic evolution. We were proud to have taken our own contribution in bringing down the cost of water by at least 80 to 90% over the years, and unlocking fantastic opportunities in terms of industrialization, urbanization, but also, believe it or not, also agricultural development. Now that water has reached levels that are sustainable enough to drive also the long-term water security and food security of the countries where we operate, which means that we have a sizable capacity in Oman, in the United Arab Emirates, in Bahrain, but of course, naturally in our home markets in Saudi Arabia. Last but not least, a natural evolution for us is towards green hydrogen. Fundamentally, what is green hydrogen? We take lots of renewable power, we take sustainably sourced water, and we produce green hydrogen. For us, green hydrogen was always about, at the end, not producing chemicals, not producing a molecule, but expanding the reach of renewable energy, of the renewable resources that Saudi Arabia and our regions where we operate are blessed with, and extend them to the world. It's a carrier at the end.
And was the trigger point that you found out that there is a real business case because of the cheap renewable energy in Saudi Arabia, or because you have excess energy that is not used and can be used? What was actually the trigger for it?
So I think that we started really looking into that seriously around 2019. And we were reaching the point at the time where our renewable power facilities were growing in scale. We were hitting the gigawatt scale, which nobody had even foreseen 10 years before. We were reaching tariffs in terms of production of solar power in particular. I think back in 2020, we brought it all the way down to the magical number of $1 per kilowatt hour. Of course, a mind-blowing number. Of course, today there are many things that have happened. Interest rates have gone back up, and a number of other parameters. But still, it is widely spread information and public that we get solar power as low as $1.2 per kilowatt hour. Wind is not so far, maybe between $1.6 to $1.7 per kilowatt hour. So of course, it makes it very competitive, but it's also scalable. We can build giga-scale facilities and connect them to the grid and have a substantial impact on the power supply of the country. So that was the
starting
first
point.
Step. The starting point. Second step is, of course, we are not hydrogen producers historically, and the partnership at the end is what will drive our venturing into that sector. And this is where, back in the days, we came together with our partner, Air Products, who are a global leader in hydrogen production, industrial gases, generally speaking, with whom we had a common venture, which is a $12 billion integrated gasification and combined cycle facility in Saudi Arabia, in Jazan, delivering, recovering, if I may say, the bottom of the barrel from an Aramco refinery, and delivering back power by way of gasifying it, and then running a 4 gigawatt combined cycle out of syngas, that is
Wow.
basically hydrogen. So this is fairly large scale business, if I may.
Yes.
And of course, building on that partnership, we started exploring what we could do more together. It started as little as looking at why shouldn't we offer a hydrogen based mobility option or solution for the Dubai Expo. And
Hmm.
eventually we landed in front of the NEOM management in Saudi Arabia, presenting a big vision for producing large scale green hydrogen, exporting it in the form of green ammonia from NEOM, and delivering it to the world. And this is where the journey started for the NEOM Green Hydrogen Project. January 2020, we signed that MOU all together. Let's do a feasibility study. A few months later, everybody gets excited. This is even better than what we thought. Let's sign a joint development agreement. And Air Products at the time raises their hand. They say, you know what, I'll take care of the product. I want to be the buyer for the entire
Hmm.
volume. And we ran with it. 2023 May officially reached financial closure, and it was a full swing in terms of construction. Today, almost a little bit more than 90% complete of a facility, and hopefully should be commercially operational in Q1 2027.
2027. Oh, this is not very far away. And I think it's a $8 billion project, right? Something of that scale.
So I think that if we have to go now into the numbers, I have to admit that I have a whole list of numbers that are hitting world records one after the
Right.
other. So this is technically the single largest green ammonia and green hydrogen facility in the world. It's one of the largest energy investments in Saudi Arabia. That's an $8.5 billion investment in total. It will be powered by a 1.7 gigawatt wind farm
Hmm.
and a over 2.2 gigawatt solar farm. And these are captive assets specifically built for the production of hydrogen. We're building almost 290 kilometers of transmission assets also to move the electrons all the way to the facility that will be producing hydrogen. And there we will have standing there 2.2 gigawatts of electrolyzers from ThyssenKrupp Nucera
Hmm.
that will be converting all of that renewable power into hydrogen that we will convert into ammonia and make it ready for shipment. So, of course, the numbers in terms of capacities for the average person, maybe it's difficult to grasp what does this mean. What is a gigawatt?
Yeah.
Maybe to give you other numbers to have a feel about what this represents in terms of footprint. We're talking about over 380 square kilometers of land being mobilized for a project of that nature. We're talking about 5.5 million solar panels being installed in a single location. That's literally a sea of panels for as far as the eye can see. And also, I think that 257 turbines that are standing at 250 meters tall each. So that's really a gigantic
It is.
facility. And I really invite everyone to have a look at the public video. It's available on YouTube, actually, and you can
Yeah.
see the latest progress as of April. So it's already a little bit old by now, but it's still, I think the pictures are already fantastic to have an idea and about how this looks like and how it will be in a few years from now.
Yeah, we will put a link in the description. Um, so, as far as I understand, this project is very important for your company's future and the company's vision, but it is also part of the overall vision for the country, right? And I think that one of your major shareholders, if I understand, is the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, and that the country Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, has a Vision 2030 where the entire country wants to transform from an exporter of oil towards an exporter of renewables. Is that understanding correct?
So the understanding is fundamentally correct, but I think it's important to really get into the details of the multi-pillared strategy that Saudi Arabia is
Please,
addressing
please.
towards its energy transition. And I believe it's really a very interesting case because, I mean, for many people looking at Saudi Arabia as the leading country in the oil and gas sector, that's not the first thing that comes to mind, that the energy transition will be running apace in the country. And actually, this is maybe one of the fastest, but also maybe one of the most profitable energy transition that is happening in the world. And I'll give you a few facts and figures here. So Saudi Arabia, until recently and until before the whole program was launched, was burning roughly 1 million barrels per day in order to produce solely power and water for its own national consumption. Okay, 1 million barrels per day.
Oil.
By 2030 of oil.
Yes.
So by 2030, Saudi Arabia would have basically pushed away the last drop of oil being used in its power and water system, with a strategy of having a power and an energy mix split 50% indigenously produced natural gas, with the obvious benefits in terms of reducing the CO2 content of the power mix, and the balanced 50% exclusively made of renewable power. Okay. And Saudi Arabia is well on track to achieve that target through an expedited program of delivering gigawatts of capacity every year until that day. So within that framework, the PIF has been mandated by the government to implement 70% of the renewable capacity for this 2030 target. And we have been blessed, and we are very proud to be a key partner for PIF in rolling out those 70% capacity of the total renewable capacity by 2030 for Saudi Arabia. So this is well on track. As far as we're concerned, we have by now around 10 gigawatts under operation, 20 gigawatts of solar under construction, another 3 gigawatts of wind under construction also. And that is completely disconnected from whatever we're doing on green hydrogen, by the way. This is exclusively to deliver power to the mix in Saudi Arabia. Okay, the last PPAs round that we signed actually in June was a total portfolio of 15
Public-private
gigawatts.
Partnership, right? Or yeah,
all under a TPP.
Yeah, just for the people
Yes.
who don't know the abbreviation.
Yes, please. Thank you. So the last power purchase agreement that was signed between government and PIF and Saudi and ACWA Power together was a 12 gigawatt package of 12 gigawatts of solar plant and 3 gigawatts of wind farms that have been launched and are now under advanced stage of construction. And we expect to be adding anywhere between 10-15 gigawatts per year in achieving that target.
Per year?
Okay. Per year, yes.
Okay.
So that is pillar number one.
Right.
Okay. Pillar number two is, of course, the Saudi Arabia is historically an energy exporter, and Saudi Arabia wants to remain an energy exporter for not only the short term, the mid term, but forever. And the rationale is very simple. Saudi Arabia is blessed with very valuable resources in terms of energy. The energy of the present, which was mostly oil, gas, but also the energy of the future, solar and wind. Okay, and Saudi Arabia today has enough land, and which translates into enough solar capacity and enough wind capacity to not only sustain its own needs, including the future increase in demand that may come as we industrialize and as we electrify and as we bring more data centers and more heavy industry in the country, but also to be able to export that renewable energy to the rest of the world. And out of that, there are two pillars that have been identified. Okay, pillar number one is the export of renewable power in its form as power, okay, electricity. So in July this year, there was an official launch about the initiative under the patronage of His Royal Highness, the Minister of Energy of Saudi Arabia. And ACWA Power signed a number of memoranda of understanding with a number of European leading energy companies from Europe, EnBW, Total Energy, Edison, Zero, in order to study the concept of basically exporting power from Saudi Arabia, primarily targeting the neighboring countries, but also Europe. Second pillar is hydrogen. And when it comes to renewable hydrogen, I think that I would say when it comes to low carbon hydrogen, I should say, first of all, Saudi Arabia, of course, has two angles to that. Number one, Saudi Arabia wants to be able to keep offering in the long term its high quality, very well cost, at a very competitive fossil fuels, but in a decarbonized fashion. And
Hmm.
you may have heard that, of course, Saudi Aramco has strong ambitions and big plans in exporting blue hydrogen in the form of blue ammonia and others. So these plans are going on. Okay. In parallel, ACWA Power is working on putting to effectively at industrial scale the export of green hydrogen and green molecules. Uh, NEOM green hydrogen was started already. It's under advanced construction. But since then, we have also announced in July the next hub in Saudi Arabia that will be located in Yambu. And the
Hmm.
objective of this hub is to eventually scale up to a very large quantities of renewable-based green hydrogen. Uh, there is enough renewable power there to scale substantially. The first phase, we will focus on a first 400,000 tons per year of green hydrogen capacity, and most likely in the form of ammonia. It's the most
Hmm.
viable outcome today, both from a market perspective, industrial perspective, and we have also some partners that have joined us, such as the German company ENBW, supporting us both in the development side, but also on the market side.
So when I hear this, this is obviously very impressive. And what comes into my mind on the one hand side, I think your country is seeing an opportunity to change the entire ecosystem towards renewables. And on the other side, you are seeing a real opportunity globally to capture more or less the market of green ammonia internationally with the fast pace that you are currently undergoing through your investments. Because I have many connections, but I have not had connections to people investing that aggressively in the topic of green hydrogen. And when I hear this, I think that you are really trying to capture this opportunity that you are seeing also globally. Is that correct?
You are correct. I think that, but the opportunity gets only created for as long as the demand gets created.
Yeah.
And the demand can only be created if we are able to offer not only sizable amounts of products, but
Hmm.
also sizable amounts of product that are competitively priced. Okay. And the reality is that our success in renewable power, bringing renewable energy to the Middle East, where it was like oil and gas was like the dominant form of energy, and making it now the cheapest and the most scalable source of energy for the power sector in the Middle East. I think the vision is the same when it comes to green hydrogen. We need to bring it down to a level of cost that makes it basically unavoidable.
What I also watched some videos and speeches that you and your CEO gave, and I think you also said in one of your events that you think that Saudi Arabia and also ACWA Power has the opportunity that it will have a sustainable cost advantage over other regions where such a green ammonia or green hydrogen is produced. What gives you this comfort that there is this competitive advantage also, for example, against local producers in Spain who also have a lot of sun, but not so much logistic to bear with? So where is this competitive advantage coming from?
Sure. Thank you for this. Is a very good question. I'll be very happy to give you a bit of insights on that.
Yes, please.
So there are many. It's really many different factors, many pillars. The first one is the available of the resources. When I say available of the resources, we always say how strong is the sun or how strong is the wind, but also the land that is required to capture that sun and capture that wind. That is equally important. Okay. And when I say land, I mean there are two different levels. One is the overall land mass that is available, And actually, when you look into the details, Saudi Arabia is a very vast country. So it's like
Yes,
it's a fairly large
it's a big
country.
one.
It's a big one. But the second is land is never free. There are always a number of constraints in the ability to mobilize land, whether in terms of the regulatory front, ownership, the ability of to use the land, on the environmental side, on the social side also. So all of these factors need to be considered before we can say that there is land available. Okay, and Saudi Arabia, the way so number one has the resources, but also has the structure from a governance perspective in order to be able to mobilize those resources in an orderly manner while complying with the strictest standards, both on the environmental side but also on the social side. Uh, and these are very critical factors. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's number one. Number two, we have demonstrated when it comes to the renewable power business that we are able to deliver, I believe, the lowest cost of power when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to renewables. Okay, and if you compare to Spain or Australia, technically speaking, we have the same conditions in terms of land and sun, okay,
Mm-hmm.
which is not entirely true because the sun is still better in Saudi Arabia compared to Spain, for example, but the tariffs are still much lower. And this is
Mm-hmm.
driven by the next three factors, I would say. Number one, governance and the involvement of the government in order to streamline the process and de-risk also for the industry the investment throughout the development phase, which is a high risk phase, but also throughout construction and operation. The next one is the cost of construction. Saudi Arabia is an extremely cost competitive location for construction, generally speaking. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe there are a number of people that are discovering, for example, that Australia will not be a competitive place to produce green hydrogen in the foreseeable future, in the short term or even mid-term, for a very basic reason. It is very expensive to build over there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Number three, you need to be able to finance those projects. And those projects are extremely capital intensive. This requires vast sums of money that needs to be mobilized. So availability and liquidity is important, but also the cost of capital is equally important. Okay, so that is and of course Saudi Arabia with its sovereign credit rating is a very attractive place to be able to raise those large sums of money with a demonstrated track record in the oil and gas sector, but also in the renewable power business also that can be translated into the renewable or the green hydrogen sector. Africa, for example, we see that as one of the key constraints. And we're present there, by the way. We are in South Africa, we're in Senegal, we're in Egypt, we're in Morocco, either with projects under operation, under construction, or under development. One of the key constraints is capital availability.
Capital. Yeah.
No matter how much land, no matter how much sun and wind there will be available, capital will remain a key constraint on African countries to be able to scale up and deliver on green hydrogen. We're working hard in finding solutions to unlock and debottleneck and support those countries. But in the short term, we have to acknowledge that given all the challenges that the green hydrogen industry has, I think that first we need to deliver something before we try to address many other issues that countries may be facing. So that's why I think that on the next one, in terms of immediate delivery, we'll be focusing on Saudi Arabia. Last but not least, the geographical positioning. Saudi Arabia is at the center of the world.
Yeah, you have your markets left and right? Yeah.
Basically.
On this
eventually connected.
Please go ahead. Sorry.
We can be eventually connected, of course, through shipping, and this has, of course, a wide range of optionalities. We eventually see a world, so maybe one day there will be pipelines. So when we are operating at a scale that justify that kind of infrastructure. But in the meantime, I believe that ammonia shipped is a very flexible way, very cost-effective way to get the business started.
So what I get out of this as a learning for me, because when you are at conferences in Europe, you often talk to banks and then the people say hydrogen projects are not yet bankable because the people don't know the depreciation value of the assets or the people don't see the off-takers in a binding way. when I understand you correctly, this hydrogen projects in Saudi Arabia, at least, are in the meantime as bankable as like pure solar and wind projects. Is that correct?
It's not theory, it's practice.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the practice is that we have done it once.
Okay. And when you do it once, then the trust comes, and then you can easily do it the next one.
NEOM Green Hydrogen, $8.4 billion total investment. Out of that, $6.5 billion were raised on a non-recourse basis using project finance.
Right.
And project finance is not corporate finance. It means that it's a whole different standard level of standards in terms of demonstrating so-called bankability to the lenders that can only take recourse on the project and not on the shareholders. Okay, and believe it or not, out of the $6.5 billion of debt, long-term, very long-term debt that we raised, we were oversubscribed almost twice.
Wow.
So projects can be bankable. But what matters is that they need to be made bankable.
Yeah.
And how to make them bankable is starts with having credible sponsors, number one. Number two, a technical and commercial structure that allocates the risks as per the expectations from the banks.
Please, I agree. And it seems that you're partnering with global companies that have the trust, and contracts that these companies sign will materialize, and therefore you can do these large scale projects. Yeah. I also believe that there is a need to act because of the global economics, and we see strong countries investing in that direction. And unfortunately, there are also big countries not playing part in the green revolution. But it's good to hear that the Middle East is just like Asia going in that road. What you were talking also in 2024 at an event of ACWA Power, you said you should embrace innovation at scale. So innovation is one thing, identifying a new demonstration, but the real innovation takes place when you try to scale a technology, right? And what I found impressive when listening to you is that you had a clear understanding where actually the costs are, be it in energy production, be it in the electrolyzer process, or in the logistics. Can you give insights into that thinking that was quite striking when I heard it the first time?
Sure. I think that at least in the type of projects that we develop that are giga scale facilities oriented towards export, what we see generally speaking is that you will have roughly 60 to 65% of the chain invested exclusively in power production and transmission. Then you will
That
have
would be solar and wind, right?
solar, wind, transmission, but also battery storage.
Right.
The next bucket will be for the actual hydrogen production, the plant. That will be roughly 25 to 30% of the chain. And within that plant, it's very important to understand that the so-called electrolyzer, that piece of equipment that have drawn so much attention as to where it will be in the future, only represents maybe 30% of the cost of that plant.
So it's a very small
within the
amount.
entire chain, it's basically 30% of 30%. So it's
Yeah.
basically a mere 10%.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you have maybe 10, 15% on the downstream, or we call the export chain, if I may, which is converting into ammonia, storing ammonia, and exporting it eventually. Okay. So what does this mean is that even if today electrolyzers were virtually free, well, it doesn't solve the problem of making green hydrogen half the price.
Yeah.
There's something else that needs to give.
But it also says that we somehow bust a myth, because many discussions are going in the direction hydrogen is too costly. And when you look at the actual economics that you have outlined, that most of the money goes into the energy production, which is already a known field of the industry. And then you have the logistics, and only a very tiny part of the actual investment goes into the hydrogen production itself, the electrolyzer. I think it also gives a new perspective to this, correct?
So we have two ways to look at it. One way to look at it is I would say, static view is that power is already cost effective. If to hydrogen, it's only a small portion. If hydrogen, basically, even if hydrogen, the actual electrolysis piece um, evolves well and goes down in cost, it will not make a dent in the overall cost of the chain. So, and there is no point in wasting time because green hydrogen will never become cheap. That's one school of thought.
Yeah.
The other school of thought is that, well, it's not because it doesn't represent a big cost in the chain that it doesn't have a massive impact. Okay. And one very fundamental point is the power consumption, the so-called efficiency of those electrolyzers. They are drastically inefficient. So for each unit of power that I put in an electrolyzer, I dissipate maybe 35 to 40% in the air as heat.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly wasteful. Okay. What does this mean is that if we focus on improving efficiency of those electrolyzers, well, out of the same investment that I make in a hydrogen plant, maybe I will be able to reduce by half my investment in the power upstream. And that's maybe 30% of the total cost of the chain gone, simply by improving the efficiency. Of course, the numbers are exaggerating here, but we have to take through the journey of knocking down one point after the other of efficiency that will allow us to knock down one after the other a couple of percentage point of the amount of power that we need to invest it into getting green hydrogen done. And this is how the solar industry moved. We started the industry, we were merely between 12 15% of efficiency at cell and module level. Today we are hovering almost at the theoretical limits every year, 1% of the time. And this is how we have to bring down the cost. The other component, to be fair, is yes, those facilities today, the hydrogen production plant, the stacks are only a small portion. The rest is primarily valves and pumps and steel and concrete. And so you would think that there is not much to be done there. But you'd be surprised about what ingenuity can get us to, getting into actual value engineering, working on the actual stack in itself and how it integrates with the whole balance of plant in order to reduce drastically the entire cost of the balance of plants, review everything about standards, about the typical way things were done so far in the past that are just copied now, because this is the first thing that we do when we have something new. The first thing that we do is, okay, let's look at something that is the most similar, and we copy it, and then we see how it works. But then after that, we have to start working on it and start improving it. And even that part of steel and valves and pumps and everything, we have actual demonstrations that in a CSP plant, in a concentrated solar plant, which is made of steel and glass and pumps and valves and everything, we've still managed to bring down the cost of a plant like this by more than 50% down.
Exactly.
And that was
so
done by
the
value engineering, procurement at scale, different methods in how we design, how we procure, and we were able to get that done. So that's why even on that part of the hydrogen plant, even if it's not rocket science, electrolyzers coming out with the latest technology or what have you, there's a lot of money and there's a lot of value to debottleneck from there. And it will happen, but it can only happen if we do. So we have to do one project after the other and keep improving one project after the other so that we can bring down the cost.
So this means basically the big leverage when we bring up the efficiency of electrolyzers is that we can get rid of a lot of the investment at the beginning to produce the energy to have the same outcome. So for example, if we have an 8 billion project and we would increase the efficiency of an electrolyzer by 5%, and 60% of this 8 billion is going into energy production, you basically by increasing it 5% can probably save hundreds of millions of US dollar in the actual production sector, right? And that's the leverage that you are talking. So by improving the system, the electrolyzer system, we have a big leverage because we don't need the same costs in the energy production, right?
That is exactly the point. But I believe this is not only the only area because usually there are always concerns about, efficiency or technology breakthroughs. Unless they happen, it's difficult to believe that they will happen.
Yeah.
So I think that we have to keep believing that they will happen, keep investing there, but also be very pragmatic and address those very basic things, really in the balance of plan that we tend to and address them. And that is really about this is what I would call not pure technology innovation, but that's industrial innovation. It's getting into the actual plants, building them,
Yeah.
reviewing them, optimizing them one plant at a time.
Yeah. So a recent innovation that I came across is that we learn from the silicon industry. And there are, in the meantime, also silicon-based fuel cell and also electrolyzer stacks that have way less cost and increase in efficiency. And this might be a technology to look at in the future. Okay, so this is great. So bottom line is innovation needs to happen not only on the single part, on the idea, but innovation and engineering ingenuity, as you call it, needs to be based also on these large-scale projects, right? Where we need to design these large-scale projects in an innovative way that they produce more power with less input, right? That's basically the task where you see a lot of improvement, room for improvement, as I understand.
Definitely, but also what's important is that to make it a truly global market is infrastructure is key.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in the context of the NEOM green hydrogen projects, for example, when we arrived there, it was a virgin piece of desert. There was nothing.
Yes.
Literally. Okay.
Yeah.
We had to fight for the handful of porto cabins to be able to have to sleep overnight, to be able to do a site visit, because there was nothing. So out
Mm-hmm.
of this project, we are building the entire power system, substation, transmission, water supply, part of the roads, the jetty to be able to have a port, absolutely everything from scratch. Of course, this is expensive because you have to invest in infrastructure. But the only way you can live with that is that you need to go big so that you can absorb the cost of that infrastructure.
Yes.
So the reason why we're going for such large scale projects, not because we want to deploy so much capital on very risky ventures, is simply because the numbers don't stack up unless we go very big.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is the number one realization. But the other realization also is that what is not happening is infrastructure on the downstream to import all of those molecules. And that is a critical bottleneck today in the takeoff of that industry is import infrastructure.
Right.
Whether it's the ability to import and handle ammonia at large scale. I was absolutely shocked when I discovered actually that if you look at all of Northwestern Europe, the entire ammonia storage capacity is maybe in the order of magnitude of 200 to 240,000 tons of ammonia.
And
In
if
a
your
single
project,
project in NEOM, we produce 1.2 million tons per year. In that project, we are building 140,000 tons per year, 140,000 tons of storage. That's more than half of all of what Europe has in one single location. Okay.
Yeah.
The next thing is that if we want to have a truly global hydrogen value chain, you need to be able to convert that ammonia that arrives in Europe into hydrogen. So, like the likes of Germany have made fantastic decisions to invest in a large-scale hydrogen backbone.
Yes.
Okay. It's under implementation. For me, this is a great signal to the market. But the worst thing that could happen is to build those pipelines and that for them to stay empty. And the most cost-efficient way to fill those pipelines is to bring the cheapest molecules from around the world, okay, that will come in the form of ammonia, They need import terminals to be brought into Germany, and they need ammonia crackers to convert that ammonia into hydrogen. And the
Yes.
beauty is that this is not rocket science technology. There are crackers already under operation. There are pilots for new technology being already under operation in Europe. So this is not, again, science fiction, but it's about actually implementation. And the demand, there is so much focus about the demand. There is no demand. Nobody is willing to commit, and so forth. Yes, who would commit to pay green hydrogen at 10 euro per kilo? Who
Yeah.
would commit to bankruptcy? Nobody would do that.
Yeah.
But what people will be willing to commit to is reasonably priced, low carbon, renewable based hydrogen that is delivered to their gate,
Yeah.
wherever they are in Central Europe. And in order to do that, supply needs to scale up at a very cost competitive basis. Okay. Some of us are working on that in many different geographies in the world. The other component is infrastructure to import those very competitive molecules to be made available in order to make sure that that hydrogen is able to reach them and they are able to have a full value chain available to them, and that is decently priced also. Then you will see those long-term contracts coming in. People are looking for molecules. People want long-term solutions to transition away from their current fossil fuel addiction, if I may. However, they need solutions. And right
Yeah.
now, offering them exclusively electrolyzer based hydrogen produced in Central Europe, extremely high prices, and simply because the power is expensive, because Europe is in shortage of power,
Yes.
then other solutions need to come in, and those other solutions can be put together, but they need to be debottlenecked. And I would say, if I had one big message to any big investors or even governments in Europe, please invest in import infrastructure.
Mhm. I guess this is also something that Air Products will be aggressively working on, because if they are required to buy all the green ammonia that you are producing, this is a precondition for selling it properly to customers in the world, right? Because they also need this infrastructure to get the green hydrogen cracked and also delivered to the end customers, right? So this paints a nice picture, because what I get out of this call is you are also trying to build the entire system through corporations and partnerships. And if I understand it correctly, that you are also looking for partners that go along with you to build these type of big projects. Is that correct? Or are you solely focused on Air Products?
Absolutely not. I believe that we are the DNA of our company is to develop large, complex projects in partnership. I think there's not a single project where we are alone. We're systematically in partnership, and we have a vast and vastly diversified pool of partners with whom we work. And as I've notified you earlier, in July this year, we welcomed the entry of EnBW, which is a old, large, established German utility with a long history in the energy market in Europe, to join us to co-invest in developing that infrastructure, that production facility, and eventually also take an important role on the offtake side. So I think that we are, of course, diversifying our partnerships. Our focus really is, generally speaking, is number one, debottlenecking and addressing the demand through the market outreach, but also the ability to have access to infrastructure, customers, and be able to have those conversations about delivering to them an end-to-end solution that will be also de-risking the upstream. Yes, of course, we're making big investments. We cannot do that alone. As I mentioned, these are very large-scale investments, big capital commitments, and I believe that it's only sound to make sure that we actually join forces into
Yeah.
making these large-scale projects happen. The value chain is extremely long, and there are many different actual levels of expertise across that chain, from the power production, the conversion into hydrogen, the conversion into ammonia, handling of ammonia, This is a whole, I mean, there are people that have been doing that for decades, only focused on handling ammonia. That's all they do. And this is like their core business. So, and then after that, of course, the landing, the conversion, the delivery. So this is an extremely long and complex chain, and nobody in the world has all the capabilities to handle that on its own. So
Yeah.
so this business will never take off without partnerships.
So what I get out of this is a clear call to action globally, but also in Europe, to make sure that if the world wants to go green, that we can also consume the large quantities of green ammonia / green hydrogen that you and your company is currently producing. Please put yourself into the year 2030, Driss, for a second, and tell me what you would like to have achieved by that date personally.
Well, you said personally, so should I say that as an individual or professionally also?
I would say you can answer it in a both way. I think you have your professional role as a leader for the hydrogen business in ACWA Power, but you might also have a personal goal because you are so passionate. So if you want, you can answer both. Would be interesting.
I think I'm quite lucky that there is a large confluence of interests actually between our business roles and what drives me from a passion, really. And number one, to not only to make green fuels and green chemicals affordable, but to make everyone believe that they are affordable. That will be, I
to
would
build
say,
the confidence.
Yes, to build the confidence. So that is like number one, get it done and build the confidence that it can get done. Okay, that is like second, start producing at scale. We'd love to be operational at those big scales by 2030. So 2030 will be a very important date, and it's also the milestone that has been established by a number of European countries also to start having important. We'll say uptake of the market, not only in Europe, by the way, also in the Far East. We've seen markets like South Korea or Japan that have equally ambitious plans there, and with whom we see actually very interesting traction. I would be, of course, looking forward to create the engagement. But generally speaking, also, frankly, create disruption.
Yes.
Beyond what people would have even expected. Because that is what will really completely change the overall perspective. And what I see about that is that renewable power, I think that we got to grid parity a few years ago already. But we have moved beyond grid parity now. And when I say move beyond grid parity, I'm not talking about the single megawatt hour of power available that is cheaper than the grid. That was achieved already a few years ago. No, it's the ability to replace the conventional power system through a fully renewable system, through the combination of extremely cheap renewable power, energy storage, demand flexibility, and grid build out through this combined system, and be already at par or lower than a fully conventional system. That is what I call pure disruption. And we are there, by the way. People keep believing, keep trying to deny the obvious, but we're already there, and it's happening already in many different countries. The rest of the countries that are not following through are basically just trying to buy themselves some time before the reality catches up with them. Okay, I'd like to achieve the same with green fuels.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to be able to address everything with cables, unfortunately. There will always be a few applications where we need molecules, or where people cannot get access directly to those resources because of their geographical conditions. Japan, for example, yes, we would love to have cables going to Japan to export power directly. The reality is that they will need to receive even a lot of the resources that they need for their own power supply through molecules. And this is where we see, I think, that there is a big, I would say, disruption potential to make those green fuels competitive enough for them to help them fully decarbonize their power sector.
I think you are quite a bold professional, and many young professionals are also watching this channel. what would be your number one recommendation to young professionals? Should they engage in the hydrogen economy, and how can they become so successful like you?
Should they do it? Yes.
Okay.
The more the merrier, but also we
Yeah.
need the best talent, the best brains, and the most motivated people in the energy industry to join, because at the end, innovation and development only comes from the people that make it happen.
Yeah.
So at the end, human capital is the number one, I would say, investment today that I would highlight as a need
Hmm.
to support us in this general energy transition, but also particularly in the green hydrogen sector. And yes, of course, there are ups and downs, and of course, the as it becomes trendy, less trendy, the young tends to be basically moving a bit left and right in their beliefs. I think that my big recommendation is that believe in it, and whatever, no matter how hard or how strong is the storm outside,
Push through.
keep moving, push through.
Okay. Okay, this has been great, Driss. I have learned quite a lot in this podcast format from you, because I learned that there is a very ambitious company called ACWA Power in Saudi Arabia, which not only fulfills its vision, but contributes in a big way to the vision of the entire country. By 2030, we will find that Saudi Arabia have moved from burning oil for its own demand to a more renewable space, and that you really try and strive to be the global leader in exporting also renewable energy into the global markets. And given how aggressively you invest and how you move on scale, I'm quite confident that if we will talk in 3 or 4 years' time, you might have achieved this goal that you have given yourself, that people really believe in the change. So we are currently on the trajectory, and early adopters are following, but still there are doubts. But with your actions, I think you produce the ground for people to make to believe in the change, right? And I'm very happy that you shared your wisdom. So thank you for doing this, Driss.
Thank you very much for having me today. Equally enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to, of course, further engagement with not only the people who will listen to the blog, but also the wider industries. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.